you know, that all questions can be sufficiently resolved when you get to the heart of the matter in terms of the source of the question. And the source of the question is you thinking that you are a personality and that you are separate from the world. And from that point of view, the questions that you ask seem to be valid questions, right? Because that you who considers itself to be real and separate from the world is trying to figure it out, trying to understand what doesn't make sense. Right? But when you deal with the source of the problem, when you deal with the possibility that maybe the problem is where you're looking at reality from. Maybe the problem is who you consider yourself to be. And maybe if you were free from that mistaken identity, the things that you have questions about would reveal themselves. That things would reveal themselves to you. Because what appears to be hidden or confusing or doesn't make sense appears to be hidden, confusing, and not make sense to you, to who you are being, to you're being a rational person, you're being a person who tries to figure everything out, who tries to understand what's happening. You know, at one point in the past, I was in the airport once, coming back from somewhere, and I saw a vendor selling this illusion, this trick. And what it was is this, what he was selling is this string that you can't see. And I don't know how many of you have ever seen the illusionists or the magicians that would have the dollar bill floating in the, floating, or put a dollar bill in a bottle and close the bottle cap, and even inside the bottle they can make it float, right? You don't see that much anymore, right? Yeah, because that trick's been sold. That's what the guy was selling in the airport, right? And he was, demonstrating it, and it's a really cool illusion, right? So I bought one because at that time my stepson was, still young enough to believe illusions. So I bought one and I brought it home, and I practiced a little bit with it, and then I showed it to him, and he was freaking out. He was freaking out like, wow, look, how did you do that, right? This is what we say when we look at these illusionists do things, as if they're doing it, right? That's the mind. The mind looks at what's happening, right, and sees it in a certain way, just like the way you just said, sees it in a certain way, and then wants to try and understand what's really going on. It seems like it's really happening, right? So my point is this. That illusion, once that illusion is seen for what it is, right? Once you know that it's not really happening and it's just a mechanical thing that's being done with a piece of string that you can't see, you lose interest in it. After I played around with that with my stepson for a while, and then, I gave in and told him how to do it, and then of course he wanted to do it with other people, right? But that didn't last long before he lost interest in it, and I lost interest in it, and I never, paid it any more attention. That was it, right? But that's not the case with the illusion you have about who you are, is it? No. The illusion that who you are is an illusion that is being maintained consistently and is not being questioned. Even though, see, because if you look at an illusion like this trick was, right, you can reason out, I would say that you can reason out, but the reason it's such an attractive trick is because most people say, how did you do that? As if the person's actually doing it, right? But you can reason out and see that, that can't really be happening. And if that's not really happening, then the trick is how he's making it appear to be happening, right? But we don't take that same way of understanding how an illusionist creates an illusion and look at the illusion of who we think we are. If we did, we would see the same thing you see when you look at the illusion that appears to be the dollar bill floating in the air. If you did, you would see that there is a trick. There is a trick. And the trick is a trick that is an ongoing process. The trick is being generated consistently by the mind and by the thought process. This is why meditation has a value, because when you practice meditation, if you move awareness, if you move attention away from the thought stream, right, there starts to be this restlessness, there starts to be this, I want to move, I want to, it starts to, you start to want to stop somehow, right? Because when you move attention away from the thought stream is generating the illusion that you are real. So when you move attention away from the thought stream, the possibility of noticing the trick starts to be there. The possibility of noticing the trick starts to be there. And if you can spend more time out of the thought stream than in the thought stream, then the possibility of the trick starts to reveal itself, gradually reveal itself, and it becomes obvious and evident that you're not who you thought you were. Now, the proof of this is relatively simple. I mean, there are many ways to prove it, but the one that I like the most, it's obvious, is that if you got a good shot in the head and you'd had total amnesia, right, you would not know who you are. You would not know who you are. You would not know your name. You would not have a story. You would not know who you are, right? Well, that obviously has to be proof that who you are is only a memory. It's only a memory. And that memory is being maintained by the thought process, right? It's being maintained by the thought process. It's being maintained with the idea, the ongoing idea, right, that I think, therefore I am, right? How many people questioned Descartes when he came up with that conclusion? They thought it was genius. Oh, he's explained how we know that we exist because we think we exist. And it's not true. That was not accurate. It's not that we think, and nobody really looked closely at the statement to see that it can't be possibly true. How can you think unless you're aware first? How can you think without being conscious first? So these things are important to get involved with in terms of doing an inquiry. Why? Why? Like I said before, why would you meditate? This is not easy. Why would you meditate? You could be at IHOP right now having breakfast, right? Well, you meditate. The reason you would meditate is because you're beginning to be interested in the possibility that the way things are going is not going to change. You get interested in the possibility that unless something is possible other than the way things are going, things are not going to go well. This is the first thing that has to be realized in order to become a seeker, in order to become interested in what we're talking about here. You want to escape from suffering. You want to escape from the inevitable realities that exist for human beings. Like the Buddha said, that you will, in time, you will get sick, get old, and die, right? That's inevitable. Right? The only possibility to escape from that inevitability is if the you that you consider yourself to be, which is a physical body, which is a personality living in time, is not true. That's the only possibility. If that's not possible, and it is true that you are a physical body living in time, then there's no way out. Then you just have to get old, sick, and die. But what these teachings and practices say is that possibility is a real possibility. It's not very popular, right? And one of the reasons it's not very popular is because you can't buy it. We live in a consumer reality these days. You can't buy it. It's not something that's easy to come by. And not only that, but most people are so completely hypnotized and brainwashed that possibility seems absurd to them. Don't tell me I'm not who I think I am. So that's why the shit has to hit the fan for most people before they really are willing to have an open mind about this, right? You have to be diagnosed with cancer. You have to be old enough to be afraid to die. You know, you have to have gone through some terrible shit in your life, and then it starts to become, well, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe there's a way out of all this, right? That has to happen. So I was talking to Jim earlier about the fact that I've been paying attention to these pure non-dualists like Tony Parsons and the other guy, Jim, I can never remember his name. But I've been paying attention to them because they take the absolute and extreme position that you're not real and you don't exist, right? That's reality, that's the truth. You're an illusion, you're not real and you don't exist, and that therefore all there is what's happening. That's all there is what's happening. And they take the absolute position about this, so when they have meetings with people, and I attended one yesterday for a couple of hours, because I'm interested in the phenomenon, I'm interested in what's going on with this message and so forth. And what happens is, you know, once you've seen one of the meetings, you've seen all of the meetings, because they give a brief explanation for what they have to suggest and offer, and then they have people ask them questions. And because they're coming from an absolute position, if you have a question, your question has to be a mistake. Because if you don't exist as the premise, then who's asking the question? And when somebody asks a question, it always goes the same way. They simply get corrected and say, no, I'm not here to answer your question, and there's nobody over there to ask it, right? But the people keep coming. The people keep coming because there's something about what they're saying that resonates, that seems to be true and seems to be related what many other spiritual teachers are saying, although they say what they're saying is completely different from other spiritual teachers. And if you really investigate it, you can understand what they mean by that, because other spiritual teachers are saying, I am a person and teaching you as a person about not being a person. And what Tony Parsons is saying is, I am not a person and you are not a person and there isn't anybody, and so all there is what's happening. And anything that you say that's other than that is a story about it, and it's hypothetical and it's not real. And so it's useless. It's just propagating an illusion, right? But the people who teach it on the other side say, well, you may say it's propagating an illusion, but this illusion is the life we're living. It's the world we're living in, it's the life we're living. So whether it's an appearance or whether it's reality, it appears to be real, it feels real, and therefore it's relevant. You can argue for both sides of this thing, right? So the way I end up looking at it is I'm more interested in is what can, because this is where people are really coming from when they ask the questions. They're trying to get to, is there something that I can get from asking questions that will give me information that I can use to get to this enlightened place, to get to this freedom, to get free of suffering, to get free of identifying with myself as a physical body and thinking that I'm a separate personality. And I think that's a valid interest, is to see is there factors. And so that's what I've been looking for, because the way I see it, if I can be of any use here to you, other than just in helping you to learn to meditate and establish a meditation practice, the use that I can be is to share with you whatever I see to be factors that are useful. So there are two things that I noticed. In all the people that I have studied, and there's been a number of them over a long time, that claim to have waken up and become self-realized or enlightened or whatever you want to call it, free from suffering. There are a couple of things that seem to always be true. One is that they had an intention to get free. That they saw the possibility and they were seeking to realize the possibility. They had an intention to get free. And in many cases, that intention was an intention that they paid a lot of attention to over a period of time, doing a lot of practicing, a lot of learning, a lot of looking and seeing as clearly as they could the nature of reality. So that's one thing. So and that makes sense to me, right? That there's no possibility to wake up unless you discover you're asleep, to say it in that way, right? There's no possibility to want to escape from suffering unless you recognize that you are suffering and it's possible to escape. So you have to have that intent, right? And then the other thing that seems to be a factor that's always there, which is interesting because it's paradoxical, is once there is an intention and there's a motivation and there's a drive for freedom, and so you become a seeker, right? That seeking process has to come to a place where you realize that it's useless. That seeking process has to come to a place where you realize it's useless and you give up trying. You give up trying to be awake. You give up trying to be enlightened. You give up trying to be self-realized. And the way that works is that, as Paul Hederman says, I love the way he puts it, is you don't have to get out of something you're not in. That's why you don't have to try to be awake, right? Because you are awake, right? But you're living in a deluded state about it. So those are two factors that have always been there. If you look at Eckhart Tolle, if you look at Adyashanti, if you look at Mooji, I mean, I've studied these people's lives. If you look at Papaji, if you look at Nisargadatta, if you look at any of these people, including Ramana Maharshi, so if you're a student and you know all these names, in every single case, both those factors were present. Both those factors were present. So I think that can be useful, right? Because the thing is this, as far as I can tell, the clear, and this goes back to the example I gave earlier about the illusion with my stepson, right? The clearer you are that there's nothing to figure out to explain the illusion, right? The clearer you are that there's nothing to figure out to explain the illusion. In other words, going back to what I said about, you can see how it gets created by your conditioning, the learning process, your thought process, you know, the idea that you relate to yourself as a body with a personal history. You can see how all that works to create the illusion, right? In the same way that I could see how this invisible string creates the illusion, right? To the extent that you see that that's so, and having seen that, simply start living with that truth. Simply start living and seeing things as they are, right? That the fact that you now are seeing things as they are starts to take you out of living the life in the illusion. Now, that's clearly easier said than done, because as I have pointed out many, many times here, you can't function in the world without continuing the pretense. You can't function in the world without identifying with your body. You can't function in the world without being a person, right? And so, on the one hand, you have to keep playing the role of being something you're not, at the same time knowing that that's not real. That's a challenging thing to do, right? Especially when you're interacting with people who really believe 100% that they are the personality and they are the body, right? They believe it 100%. And so when you're acting with them and you have a history of believing it 100% too, you see how easy it is for you to fall into it again? That's the challenge. That's the challenge. And I think what happens with these people, for example, that go to these meetings and ask these questions is they're still not absolutely clear about the illusion, such that, see, because if you're absolutely clear about the illusion, how could you have any questions? Do you understand? How could you possibly have any questions if you see things as they actually are? You could only have a question from the position that who you think you are is trying to be free from who you think you are. And if you look at that, you can see that can't possibly go anywhere. That's a circular process. Okay, well, I hope that these things that I have to share with you are of some use and some value. I don't see myself as a teacher like these other people that I refer to. I see myself as somebody who's sharing an elaboration on looking at these teachings and understanding these teachings in a way that might be helpful to you to make use of them as you practice meditation, as you continue to study the truth and study the reality of who you are and how it all works.